Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in day with about a week outdated page of notes that I wrote like a week ago. Of course, to talk about Witch Watch episode number 4. This episode is titled Kanshi Kazamatsuri, the Tengu. And as I just mentioned, yes, I pretty much wrote my notes page and watched this episode about a week ago at the recording of this video. It may be closer to 5 or 6 days, though I honestly don't remember, but as many of you do know, I am currently in college, and of course, the time of the year around where this episode comes out is it is final season, so I have been decently busy, and along with like getting ready to move out, my roommate moving out, and all of these other situations, I really haven't had a good time to sit down and actually record this video once I was planning to record it a pretty decent amount of time ago, right? And because of that, I think I sort of have a problem where I should have re-watched this episode before, or like at least reread my notes before doing the review right now, but sort of just is what it is. But if you guys don't know what Witch Watch is, it is a manga series originally written by Kento Shinohara and an animation studio production pretty much being by Bilberry Animation Studios, right? To bring us this wonderful adaptation that we have of Witch Watch currently going on, right? And of course, this is a series done by a manga reader's perspective. I've been reading Witch Watch since day one in Weekly Shonen Jump, and I have been loving this series pretty much since the beginning, since we got these original episodes so long ago. So it's just really awesome to see, hey, the anime is finally here. And that's really what this whole series is about, is just me talking about Witch Watch in the only way I know how, relating it to the manga, of course. This episode does cover chapters 9 through 11 of the manga. We have a little bit of like a reworking of how this episode is actually done, but we will be getting to all of that at the end of the video, right? And really, I don't have anything else to say before we just like go and hop right into it. Of course, like I said, I did not reread these notes. I'm just going off of like, hey, my mind's eye, what happened a week ago? And normally I record these videos like I take my notes and then about like 3 to 4 minutes later, I go through and like, okay, let's actually do the video now. But it's not really how it worked this time around. So sorry if this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded thing or whatever, but that's just sort of what you're gonna get, if you know what I'm saying, right? So we open up this episode of Witch Watch, of course, with the opening theme. I sort of like when anime does that, like, hey, sometimes it comes in during the episode, like halfway through, sometimes it comes in a few minutes or whatever, but sort of is what it is there, right? So we start off with the opening theme of Watch Me by Yoasobi. Of course, just a beautiful opening theme that every time just makes me smile a little bit more, you know what I'm saying, right? So really, to start off with the main contents of this episode, we start off with a few little jokes between Kanshi and Morito. Pretty much, both of them are going back and forth. And it's the whole idea of like, hey, Morito's not paying attention to Kan, and Kan's like not very happy about this. There's a lot like back and forth until eventually he's like, hey, Nico, I'm here to pretty much be your bodyguard. And in doing that, he's being very demanding in the Otaki household, right? There's a little bit of a joke baked in here of this little bit of a steak that like Kanshi's like, hey, I really, really want it. Morito goes and bakes this steak and pretty much like dumps it straight onto his head, like making a searing scar on his face. But yeah, it's a little bit of a funny joke there. Eventually, to sort of like even out the tensions here in this room, Nico uses the spell Animate, which pretty much animates a object of some kind on Kanshi's umbrella, right? And it's this whole thing of like where the umbrella, I think it was named like Brelly or something like that, or Breezy, something in sort of like that vein of like, hey, it's an umbrella, you're naming it based on the fact that it is an umbrella, pretty much, right? And pretty much at this point, we learn of this whole idea of the Ogre and Tengu rivalry, right? As pretty much there's this whole thing in the past where like, hey, Ogres and Tengus don't really get along with each other, and by the end of this episode, we really understand that Kanshi's like, hey, do we really need to have this happen? What if our sort of races can get along, right? There's a few jokes thrown in here. Also, there is a Tengu Slayer joke where pretty much a Tengu goes through and like slays down all of these evil, terrible, and bad ogres. It's a funny joke, and it's sort of like, okay, I get what you're saying there. It's a little funny, right? Eventually, the whole idea is like, hey, Kan was pretty much antiquated to all this stuff in the shadows, and he really wanted to help this entire time to protect Nico, right? Then we also sort of learned that he is very bad with money, and that he wants to end up staying in the Otaki household, pretty much, right? At this point, Nico goes out of the room to go and get some tea for both Kanshi and Morito, but as she does this, we see that Kanshi then just like gets extremely serious, pulls like a paper out of his pocket and just says like, hey, Miss Ibuki, Nico's mother, gave this to me. Pretty much, we have a new prophecy going on that there is an enemy within the school, right? And both Kanshi and Morito are like, oh no, this is going to be a very, very big deal. There are 2 breaks in this episode, and we get the first one right after this sort of idea right here, as pretty much after the break, we see that Nico sort of like looks at this candy bowl and she's like, oh, look at that, you know what I'm saying, right? And we see that she, on this candy bowl, she casts a spell, Friendial, right? Which pretty makes like this chain reaction on whatever food she pretty much cast it on. She casts it on this like box of like Japanese like pretzel snacks, or I think that's what they are. But pretty much like Kanshi eats the first one, and then Morito eats the one after that, making Morito be infatuated with Kanshi. And it's this whole sort of idea, like forming it into a one-sided relationship, pretty much, right? Morito's pretty much infatuated with Kanshi, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, right? And then there's the whole idea of like, hey, he's just acting really, really weird, like butting up elbows against Kanshi, like really not stuff that Morito would typically do. As eventually, we see that Khan's, like, not very much into this. He runs outside and runs into some kids out there, right? And, oh, hey, look, there's a balloon stuck in a tree. He goes down and grabs the balloon using his cool Tengu powers, but ends up dropping this food on the ground and pretty much tells the kids, like, oh, you guys can have all of that, right? So what happens now is it's like, hey, one of the kids eats it, and it's like, oh man, he's now infatuated with Morito, who's also come outside, right? Oh, another kid eats it. Oh, well, this kid is now infatuated with the first kid. Oh no, the dog eats it. The dog's also infatuated with the other kid, making a whole bunch of these one-sided relationships here in the moment, right? Until we see all of them are pretty much walking down the street, shoulder over shoulder. It's a very, very funny visual, all things considered, right? And hey, at the end of the day, we just see everybody is getting along with each other, right? Well, we now cut back into the Otogi household, as we see, like, hey, this little bit of a joke thing is finished up, as we see that Nico, Kanshi, and Morito are all sort of, like, now getting more along with each other, sitting within the house, right? And as we see they're sort of sitting in here, oh no, the doorbell rings, so Nico's like, hey, I'll go over and I'll get that, and as she goes over and pretty much opens up this package, both Kanshi and Morito hear this piercing scream from the foyer where Nico is, right? So they go to sort of run after her, and they see that she is currently wearing a corrupted dress, right? It's pretty much like one of these smocks that she normally wears, and oh no, there's been some type of magic cast on it to where it's not very good right now, right? It's like an evil dress pretty much, right? And pretty much the dress has a few of these words to stay. It sprouts eyes right where Nico's breast is, and it's like, wow, great placement for the eyes on this dress, right? As it pretty much goes and flies outside. And oh no, Morito and Kanshi need to save Nico, so they need to chase after the dress, right? Well, Morito runs outside to go do all of this, and of course, he's not making very much headway. He's just an ogre on the ground chasing after Nico, who's currently flying far, far away in the sky, right? And he's like, oh no, what are we going to do? And Kanshi's like, hey, well, we'll just have some of my friends help, as he uses a move called Bird Blackened Skies. Of course, a Tengu is very much in relation to crows. So he calls upon all of these other crows, pretty much like his support network, and just says like, hey, if you guys, you've seen a witch going around here, they're like, oh yeah, somebody was flying over that way. And Kanshi's like, hey, then that is the way that we are going over to go, right? It's a little bit of a really cool thing there. It is really this chase scene where both Morito and Kanshi are chasing after Nico, right? Well, we then cut up to Nico in the sky, as she's just like, hey, Dress, I don't know what you're up to, but just know that I know Morito is going to save me no matter what. As we get a little bit of a flashback to in the past, when Nico, of course, was living in the in this area before she moved to the pretty much Witch Holy Land, and she pretty much got stuck up in a tree, right? She was learning how to fly a broom, and she's like, hey, let me go up there and see if I can do that, but she ended up getting stuck in a tree and dropped her wand onto the ground and didn't really know what to do, right? But Morito climbed up to the top of the tree, pretty much picked her up, and brought her all the way back down. And she's like, yeah, Morito will protect me no matter what. There's a few other ideas where it's like, hey, we need to go find Nico, and they eventually do, and they see like, hey, Nico's flying up here in the sky, and the dress has sort of stopped hovering over this park, right? And as this happens, we see that Morito's like, okay, how am I going to get up there to save her? I can't necessarily fly, right? And eventually, we see who would come up then, who else, but Bradley the Umbrella. Of course, the Umbrella from earlier in this chapter, and it's the whole idea of like, whoa, that's absolutely insane and crazy. Bradley's here, right? And pretty much Morito devises his plan where he's going to be doing an aerial attack, pretty much, right? He jumps up into the air holding the umbrella. Kanshi uses some of his wind Tengu abilities and pretty much lifts Morito up into the air so he can fight this dress that Nico is currently wearing, right? The dress is like, hey, I'm going to be as hard as armor. You can't do anything about me. I'll constrict Nico and kill her right here in this instant, pretty much, right? But this doesn't end up working as Morito goes through, takes his fist, punches the dress pretty much on the blousey part where, of course, he won't harm Nico. And the dress pretty much, like, explodes and is like, oh no! And just pretty much it gets destroyed here in the moment, right? Pretty much both Nico and Morito fall to the ground. Of course, Nico pretty much just has on her underwear underneath all of this stuff. And it's like, oh, look at that funny joke, right? And, of course, Morito ends up falling on the ground and pretty much, like, just hurting himself as he lands, right? He pretty much gives Nico a sure. There's a little bit of a discussion about what's going on here, right? As they see, once Morito punches it and pretty much split the dress into like a million different pieces, I should say, not different. I've recently learned that I have been saying that word wrong my entire life, and now it's my number one goal to say the word different correctly, if you know what I'm saying, right? You see, this is just normal fabric that this dress has pretty much been made out of, right? And pretty much Morito also goes and checks the seal. It just says like, hey, will Nico continue to be in danger? Yes, the seal has not been disappeared yet. So apparently this was not the enemy within the school, right? As pretty much him and Kanshi make this little bit of a pact like, hey, we're the familiars. We must protect Nico. And hey, Kanshi officially moves into the Otogi household, and he's like, hey, let's get rid of this Ogre and Tengu rivalry. A little bit of a nice moment, right? It's now where we get the second break of the episode, and as we come back from that second break, we see that pretty much the new trio is walking home from, of course, everything that just happened, right? Or no, they're just walking home from a store, my bad, right? And as we see, they're pretty much walking back, like, got a few bags in their hands and all that other stuff, right? We see that Kanshi runs into some of the people from earlier in the chapter, some of those kids, and Morito's like, oh yeah, I didn't really know you knew those guys too well, right? And oh no, there's some other people that come up. There's like the door-to-door salesman guy. Oh, there's just an old man that Kanshi helped carry some groceries for. And we pretty much see that in this little bit of time, Kanshi has already come through and become great and insanely good friends with everybody in the town, pretty much. It's like, hey, Kanshi's just a really nice guy, and just a good guy to pretty much have around, you know what I'm saying? And the very end of the episode is like a little bit of a joke where like, hey, Morito, let's play some Yu-Gi-Oh! And we see that Morito and Kanshi end off the episode by playing a little bit of a card game that I don't know how to play called Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? Hey, I am a Magic Gathering and a Digimon card game player. I've collected Pokemon cards in the past. I have no want to ever try to learn Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, maybe I'll read the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga one day and be like, you know what? I think that seems like a really cool card game, but like, you know how expensive card games are, and you know how little money I have to even like buy manga and let alone card games? Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? But it's at this point that we get the ending theme playing for the episode. Of course, it's called Maho Spice by Ao. And we then get the next episode preview, as we pretty much have 3 sections next episode: Nico's betrayal, Kanshi's growing fable, and Morito's raging iron fist. And yeah, that's really all there is to this episode of Witch Watch. So, of course, going into this episode from a manga viewer's perspective, like I said, this covers chapters 9 through 11 of the manga, and it really hits on most of the plot points going within those chapters, except for chapter number 11. So, pretty much how this episode sort of spins off is the first part of this episode is, of course, chapter 9 of the manga, right? So, of course, like all of the Kanshi and Morito stuff at the beginning, all the way to the bottom, where pretty much Kan's like, hey, I want to pretty much move in here because I'm bad with money, pretty much. And I forgot to mention earlier, but that was like sort of an agreement between their parents, right? But it's at this point where we actually moved into chapter number 11, which was the whole chapter about the candy bowl, and then pretty much the aftermath of like, hey, we're pretty much going through, we all ate this candy to make us all buddy-buddy. That's chapter number 11. we finish up chapter 9 whenever Nico goes to the doorbell and the flying dress is on her, and then chapter 10 is the entire ordeal of like, hey, let's go through and beat up the dress here, and then we cut back into chapter 11, which is the whole like, hey, walking home from a score, Kanshi's friends with everybody. So of course what happened in the manga is like, okay, Kanshi's introduction into house, a few joke things, right? Oh no, Nico's in danger. Go save Nico. Come back. Oh, we need to make sure Kan and Morito are better friends. We're going to make them better friends, the comedy chapter, and of course Kanshi knows everybody. And that's really just how the episode goes, and I understand why they changed up the episode in this way. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me because, like, hey, this is supposed to be the episode all about Kan. And hey, we want to have these stakes be a bigger part of the episode, and we don't want these stakes to just appear, be done by the 16-minute mark, and still have like 7 or 8 minutes to fill with the other chapter. So just the way they reorganize these chapters, honestly, it's very like effortless. I would have never known if I wasn't a manga reader and I was also like flipping through the chapters while I was watching this. It's like, it's not something you see, which is whenever it's done this way, where it's clearly done with purpose and for the betterment of the series, of course, I am always in for it. I mean, we saw this with how they combined the first 2 episodes in the first 2 chapters in episode number 1 of the Witch Watch anime. They just simply did a very good job with it, right? But of course, for all that out of the way, if I had more to say about this episode during the moment when it's like, hey, I just finished watching this episode, I would probably say more now, but being the fact, like, hey, I don't particularly remember all of that stuff, being it's been like, hey, it's been like 6 or 7 days since I last watched this episode. Actually, no, it's been 6 days because I was planning to release this video on Wednesday because I got the script, because I recorded the script and did all of that on the Tuesday, and I'm currently recording this Monday night to post it on Tuesday. So it's been like 5 or 6 days either way, but is what it is there. Again, this was Witch Watch episode 4, titled Kanshi Kazamatsuri, the Tengu. Of course, the original manga is by Kento Shinohara, and the anime adaptation is by Bilberry Animation Studios. And of course, this episode of the Witch Watch anime covered chapters 9 through 11 of the manga with some definite, like, hey, we're changing up how it was originally done, which honestly, I think was much for the better of this series. So yeah, with all that out of the way, just thank you guys so very much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time for Witch Watch episode number 5. Of course, it will be titled Nico's Betrayal, Kanshi's Growing Fable, and Morito's Raging Iron Fist. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I'll see you guys next time for Witch Watch episode number 5. Of course, this is a rambly video on episode number 4. And yeah, I'll catch you guys then. This is Glowplasma 231, signing out. I don't know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Bye!